Recognizes Representative from New Jersey, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for convening this hearing, and Secretary Rigus, thank you for your testimony and your leadership. A couple of questions. You know, Marco Rubio, Secretary Rubio, gave a very interesting turn of a phrase when he said global spanning NGOs are part of an industrial complex at taxpayers' expense. I thought that was, you know, no matter what the organization is, you got to make sure that the groups that we fund, the taxpayers subsidize, are doing the job, and they're doing it efficiently, effectively, and inside the parameters of what the mandates are. So I thought his comment, which I read on the State Department's website, was excellent. Let me ask you a question. You know, you talked about in your testimony about the 1,500 office units in the U.S. For an organization that implements foreign policy. And I'm not sure totally what that means, but I know when I wrote a law back in the year 2004 on microcredit lending, we were trying to help the poorest of the poor, those making less than $1 a day, and we had a great bill, totally bipartisan with my colleagues, and all of a sudden, K Street weighed in and they wanted their cut. And I was outraged by it. And we ended up, when we got it over to the Senate, we lost. They had to get their piece of it at the expense, in my humble opinion, of the poorest of the poor. And I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but, you know, are these people, you know, maybe they mean well, but boy, some of the NGO leaders get unbelievably large salaries, 3 and 4 times what any member of Congress might make, and I wonder about that kind of subsidization for them. So maybe you want to speak to that. And as part of modernizing the department, what steps are being taken to monitor U.S. foreign assistance to avoid waste, fraud, and abuse? If you could speak to that as well. And one last thing, that for 4 years, I tried desperately to get information out of the U.S. Department of State and especially USAID about monies that were flowing, not only to PEPFAR, but elsewhere. What are we doing? Who are we subsidizing? How much are they getting? And especially, what are their sub-grantees getting? It was like pulling teeth. I would get these spreadsheets that weren't worth the paper they're printed on. Then I would also ask, as part of the data requests, what are they doing with it? Okay, you just gave $3 million to a sub-grantee. What are they doing with it? Crickets. Could not get it. So I thank you that you're trying, and I thank Secretary Rubio, to really get to some transparency, and we will get to it, because I couldn't get it. I met with Samantha Power, went over and met with her in her office, and very nice person, but I wouldn't get the information. How do you do oversight? And our subcommittee was tasked with that oversight, and we couldn't get it. I have paper trails of all this stuff that doesn't mean anything, frankly, because I don't know what that means. It's like saying, here's the scores of yesterday's game, 8-4, 3-2. Who are they? We had no idea, and what they were actually buying with U.S. taxpayer funds. So the transparency issue is, to me, so extremely important. I know you're focused on that. And finally, just let me ask you, if I could, the Deputy Secretary of Management Resources advises the Secretary on the Department's participation in the National Economic Council and interagency economic policy matters. Is that not the role for the Undersecretary for Economic Affairs or the Department's Chief Economist?
So thank you for that question, Congressman. With respect to foreign aid, you know, we've gone through, and I've got a whole list in front of me, and this has been articulated, I think, previously with respect to how money from USAID was being spent on all kinds of things that were completely unjustifiable. What we've proposed in the FY26 budget is the America First Opportunity Fund. I know, you know, that got some criticism from the ranking member on that, but I think what that proposes to do is to ensure democratic accountability on how those funds are being spent. You see the president every day in front of the cameras taking questions from the media in the Oval Office, in cabinet meetings, when he's about to get on his plane, when he gets off his plane. He's completely accessible. The secretary is as well. And if anyone wants to ask a question about how foreign assistance money is being spent, or how dollars from that fund are being spent to advance America's interests, they have an opportunity every single day to do that. By contrast, how these funds were spent at USAID, nobody knows who to ask why those monies were spent or who made the decision to spend money on, $1 million for voter ID in Haiti. I mean, there's page after page here I have of examples like that. With respect to your question on the role of the Deputy Secretary for Management and Resources, this position provides sort of strategic oversight of the management and resources of how the department conducts its affairs, with oversight, primarily of the M Bureau and of the F Bureau, but really department-wide. These other bureaus and officers are the action officers for those, taking care that strategy is effectively delivered down the chain of command in what they do every day.
Representative Chris Smith, Republican, New Jersey, raised serious concerns over the high salaries and lack of accountability in non-governmental organizations receiving U.S. taxpayer funding. During a congressional hearing, he questioned whether funds intended for foreign aid were being used efficiently and effectively, emphasizing the need for transparency and oversight. Smith highlighted the challenge of ensuring that taxpayer dollars support programs that genuinely help those in need. Reflecting on his own experience drafting a bipartisan 2004 microcredit lending law aimed at assisting the poorest populations, he recalled how lobbying pressures often diverted funds away from their intended purpose. He criticized some NGO leaders for receiving salaries far exceeding those of members of Congress, questioning the justification for such compensation when public funds are involved. The congressman also described his difficulty in obtaining clear data from the State Department and USAID regarding how foreign aid funds were allocated and used. Even after meetings with high-level officials, he struggled to identify which organizations received money, how subgrantees spent it, and whether programs achieved meaningful results. Smith stressed that these gaps in transparency undermine congressional oversight and public trust. In response, Secretary Rigus outlined the FY26 America First Opportunity Fund, which aims to increase accountability and ensure that U.S. foreign assistance advances America's interests with greater clarity and oversight. He also clarified the role of the Deputy Secretary for Management and Resources, who provides strategic oversight of departmental operations, ensuring that management and resource decisions align with overall policy goals. Smith's comments underscore a growing concern in Congress about the need for rigorous monitoring of foreign aid and the salaries paid to leaders of organizations that receive public funding. Transparency and accountability remain central to restoring confidence in how taxpayer money is spent abroad.